Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast, where we explore the mindset, skill set, and habit set of leadership communication. Using these tips, techniques, and tactics, you'll be able to talk like a leader to build better relationships and get more done. Your host is Guy Harris, who has more than 20 years of combined professional and military experience in consulting, coaching, and training in areas like team and interaction dynamics, communication strategies and tactics, as well as emotional intelligence. Take it away, Guy.
Hi, this is Guy Harris. Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast. This week's episode is titled The Power of Behavior or Communication Models. Last week, I talked about the problem of all behavior and or communication models. This week, I'm going to look at the positive side of that and what's the power of using these models. Now, I pointed out the idea last week that if you use the models in a way to use the statistical average description to perfectly describe an individual person, then you're going to run afoul of the problem with the models, which is that a way of using the model gravitates towards labeling and stereotyping of people or using population statistics to describe individual people. And that basically violates the first rule of statistics. That doesn't mean I think that behavior communication models are bad. It means that I think if you apply them badly, you get bad results. I also believe that if you understand both the power and the limitations of the models, you can use them to great benefit. And I'm going to talk about the benefit side this week. Because I think if we look at the idea of talking like a leader and communication in general, part of the idea of communication is try to make ideas common between you and another person or between you and a number of other people. And if we're going to do that, we have to understand how to adjust, modify our delivery, our word choice, our tone, our body language, all these different pieces of the communication puzzle so that they land in a way that resonates with the other person. We also have to learn how to better interpret what other people mean by the things they say and do, especially when they say or do something in a way that's significantly different from the way we would say or do it. And that's where I think behavior communication models come into play. They can help you make that leap. I came up with 3 points that I think convey the idea. And as I look at the 3 points, I have to be honest, they really all kind of get back to the same idea. They're really kind of 3 different ways to say the same idea. And hopefully by going through each of the 3 of them, the full picture of what I'm thinking will make sense by the time this is over. So I'm going to say them briefly, and then I'm going to elaborate a bit. The 3 things I think you can get from a behavior or communication model when it comes to better understanding how to connect and communicate with another person is that they give you objective and descriptive ways to think about how other people behave or communicate rather than subjective and judgmental. I'll come back and explain that in a minute. I think they give you an emotional hook to better understand another person when their filter or their approach is different from yours. And they provide what I would call a map, kind of like Google Maps or any other GPS-based mapping system for navigating the difference between you and them. So I'll take each of those 3 things individually. One of the things that you get from a behavior or communication model is an objective and descriptive rather than a subjective and judgmental description or understanding of other people. Now, the idea is this. If the only filter I have is my own, I'm going to tend to view everyone's behaviors, word choice, tone, body language through that filter rather than attempting, limited as it might be, to apply their filter to their behavior or word choice or tone or body language. And what that means is that I'm going to project my bias or my negative interpretation of their behaviors or word choice or focus rather than try to understand maybe the positive motivations they bring to the table. And using the language of the DISC model, and I'm using DISC because that's the model I teach and use and promote the most. And I would say you could probably do the same thing with any model, Myers-Briggs or social styles or Big Five or any of these models. You could use the languaging of those models to do what I'm about to do using the DISC terminology. So if we look at the 4 primary approaches to communication, the 4 primary styles described in the DISC model, and in other episodes of Talk Like a Leader, I've talked about the idea that We want to view these as styles of communication rather than as styles of people, because we want to stay away from judging and labeling people. We want to stay understanding and descriptive rather than subjective and judgmental. But if a person has dominant behavior traits in the DISC model, outgoing and task-oriented, I can look at their behaviors and say, oh, I see that they're focused on results. I see they're focused on problem solving, rather than saying, oh, they're aggressive and rude. I can stay on a more positive interpretation of their drivers rather than going to the negative side. If I look at a person with inspiring traits, outgoing and people-oriented, I can look at their behaviors and go, oh, what they're trying to do is make a connection here. Oh, they're trying to lighten up the situation. Oh, maybe they're stressed because there hasn't been enough interaction or time to tell a story or time to make a personal connection. I can filter it through that lens rather than say, my goodness, they're flaky and flighty. I can stay in the positive rather than go to the negative. If I look at a person with supportive traits, and I can take this thought process all the way around the model, and I can see that a person with supportive traits, maybe their hesitancy to make a decision or their hesitancy to engage is because they're concerned with upsetting the relationship, or they're concerned with creating a conflict, rather than saying, oh my goodness, they're such a pushover. They're so indecisive. So I can stay in the positive, understanding, oh, they're trying to avoid conflict, rather than they're indecisive. I can put a positive or objective, hopefully descriptive conversational point or perspective about what I see and how the person's responding, rather than get irritated and judgmental. Or I can say that a person has cautious traits. I can say, they're just looking for information. They just want a good answer. They need data to feel comfortable, as opposed to saying, oh, they're so OCD, or they're just too picky. Basically, these models give us a way to be objective and descriptive, hopefully positive, rather than subjective and judgmental, which tends to the negative. It also gives you an emotional hook, which is a different way of kind of saying the same thing I just said. There's a person I used to work with who talked about the idea of trying to hang a coat on the wall. And if there's no hook on the wall, the coat just falls to the floor. And try as you might, that coat's going to fall to the floor every time you try to hang it on the wall. Yet if you put a hook there, that coat will hang there and it'll stick. That's kind of like that with understanding other people. If I don't really have an emotional hook, like for me personally, I have absolutely no inspiring traits. And so if you just tell me that it's important for people with inspiring traits to feel like other people like them or recognize them or acknowledge them or engage with them, there's nothing there for me to hold on to. I just, frankly, from an emotional level, intuitively don't really get it because it doesn't connect with me. Yet with the DISC model and understanding that this is a completely normal way of doing things, and even though it's different from how I do things, it's completely normal, then it gives me a hook to go, oh, even though I don't have that feeling or that perspective, I can understand how they do and why they do. So it allows me to better understand that person because it gives me a hook to hang that understanding on, a hook beyond my personal experience. And another way to look at it is to think of it kind of like a map. These communication and behavior models will serve sort of like, I'll use Google Maps as an example, navigating a trip between me and the other person. If I go to try to understand how to get from where I live in Travelers Rest, South Carolina to Indianapolis, that happens to be that I know the way, but what if it was a new trip for me? I can look in Google Maps and it'll tell me, if you start here and you want to go there, here's how you do it. Well, if I've known a person for a while, I've probably kind of figured out the path to navigate a connection with that person. But what if they're new to me, or I don't know them all that well, or this is a first interaction, or it's a new situation with the same person? The communication or behavior model serves as like a map of the terrain, or a map of the distance, or a map of the route between my perspective and their perspective. So it gives me a framework for navigating that difference more successfully, rather than just kind of a random guess trying to figure out how to get there. So the three things that I think behavior and or communication models give you, the power of them, is they give you objective and descriptive ways of understanding other people rather than being subjective and judgmental. And that allows you to be more positive and understanding rather than negative and judgmental. It gives you an emotional hook to better understand what a person means or what their perspective is, rather than having nothing to hold on to because it doesn't fit your personal experience. It gives you a hook to understand them better. And it serves as a bit of a map so that you can more intentionally navigate the difference between you and make a better connection and communicate more effectively. Even though I think behavior and communication models have a common problem, do I think they can be useful? Absolutely, I do. I teach one of them, the DISC model. I promote it. I have a website, discpersonalitytesting.com. And if you don't have a model you're using, then I'd love to serve you through that site to help you in your effort to be a more effective communicator, more effective leader. So I think if you'll take the time to study, learn, and apply behavior and communication models and do them through the right perspective, that is to understand and connect with people rather than to judge and label them, you can talk like a leader. This has been the Talk Like a Leader podcast. You can listen to this show every week wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Guy Harris, and thanks for listening.